Intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for May 21st. Your readers today are
Ted Pijacki
and Ruth Nowotniak. And we'll start with our weather forecast. Partly sunny and cool today, high of 59. Partly cloudy tonight, low of 41. Times of clouds and sun tomorrow, high of 65. Saturday, cooler with rain, raw, damp, and dreary to start the holiday weekend, high of 56. Sunday, warmer with a couple of showers, high of 71. Nationally, the high was in Stafford, Virginia at 97, and the low is at Rawlins, Wyoming at 17. Our sunrise was at 5:47, and it will set at 8:38 p.m. And our weather trivia question: for its size, which state has the greatest number of tornadoes? And the answer to that is Oklahoma. So now we will go to our first page, to an analysis article. IRS forever barred from auditing Trump family in New Deal. President Trump is a studied beneficiary of the Overton window. That is, in the many extreme and norm-busting things he does over time make things that would once be scandalous appear more mundane and unremarkable. Such is the case with Trump's wrangling of billions of dollars from the federal government for an anti-weaponization fund. The president tried to get the federal government he controls to pay him $10 billion, but he's ultimately settling for $1.7 billion for people, read Trump's allies, who claim they were unfairly targeted by the previous administration. The agreement explicitly says none of the money will go to Trump or his family personally, so it might not seem like an especially big deal. The government pays parties it has wronged all the time. But it is a big deal and highly problematic for a number of reasons. New details quietly released Tuesday reinforce why. The government, without any fanfare or even announcement, quietly added some very serious terms to the settlement that are remarkably favorable to Trump and those around him. They say the government is, quote, forever banned and precluded, unquote, from bringing claims against Trump, his family, or his businesses for past tax issues up to the date of the settlement this week. If the terms are allowed to stand, Trump, his family, and his businesses would effectively be immune from claims or examinations related to matters pending before the IRS, included in previously filed tax returns. The terms were quietly added Tuesday in a hyperlink to Monday's original Justice Department press release. DOJ spokesperson Natalie Baldassar defended the addition to the settlement's terms by suggesting it was appropriate to settle Trump's complaint about the unauthorized leaking of his tax returns, the subject of his initial $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS. An IRS contractor in 2024 pleaded guilty to leaking Trump's and others' tax returns and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She noted Trump could still be pursued for future tax issues after the settlement date. But this is anything but business as usual. This is a government that Trump controls, effectively giving him immunity. And it's a type of immunity that history shows he could really use. The New York Times in 2018 described Trump in an extremely thorough investigation as having participated in dubious tax schemes during the 1990s, including instances of outright fraud. A judge in 2023 found Trump and his sons liable for fraud. Trump in 2024 was convicted on 34 criminal counts of falsifying business records. And the Times reported Tuesday that the terms would also spare Trump from a specific audit in which the adverse ruling could have cost him $100 million. Trump, as a presidential candidate in 2016, promised to release his tax returns, as every major party candidate since 1980 had done. But then he reneged on that promise, citing being under audit. But even before the new terms were added on Tuesday, the details released about the settlement were a huge boon to Trump. For one, while the settlement says he and his sons will receive no economic benefit from this settlement agreement, that doesn't mean he gets nothing of value. Far from it. For one, it says Trump will receive a formal apology from the United States. Again, this isn't a normal settlement. This is one in which the president essentially sits at the top of both sides of the agreement, and he's getting one of those sides to register an official policy that furthers his claims of victimization. The more significant aspect is that Trump can use the fund to pay off scores of allies who did all manner of things, including, sometimes illegal, on his behalf. That's mostly notably the case with those who, in many cases, literally rose up in arms for Trump on January 6, 2021. Vice President Vance on Tuesday declined to rule out financial payments to the many already pardoned January 6 rioters who assaulted police, suggesting some of them might too have been mistreated. Law enforcement officers who protected the U.S. Capitol that day sued the Trump administration on Wednesday to block the implementation of the fund, arguing in part that it could be used to finance paramilitary organizations. The suit, filed by officers Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges, calls the arrangement the most brazen act of presidential corruption this century. It accuses Trump of creating a $1.7 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund to finance the insurrectionists and paramilitary groups that commit violence in his name. The fund could also benefit people who declined to provide investigators information that might have hurt Trump. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, for example, once cut a deal to cooperate with those investigators and then inexplicably lied to them, exposing himself to years more in prison. Trump, who's repeatedly floated pardons for those who toe his line, later pardoned him. Now, breaking the law in ways that benefit Trump could come with a cash payout, too. That empowers Trump politically, even if the cash never enters his personal bank account. Just think of the message it sends to other allies about how he will protect and reward them. And then there's the level of control Trump has over the fund. The terms of the settlement say it's to be run by 5 members who are appointed by the Attorney General, including one in consultation with congressional leaders. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is Trump's former defense lawyer, and he gets to unilaterally appoint 4 out of 5 members. What's more, Trump can remove any member without cause at any point. That means these people will be answerable to Trump, who has in many ways made Blanche's DOJ an arm of his own political operation. The reports about who's being compensated are also set to be confidential, effectively giving the administration cover from public scrutiny. And the settlement allows no appeal, arbitration, or judicial review of claims, offers, or other determinations made by the fund's members. It's an immense amount of control centralized under Trump that sounds quite a bit like a slush fund. It's reminiscent of his Board of Peace, which basically gives Trump full, effective control over billions of dollars contributed by countries seeking to curry favor with him. The Board of Peace's charter gives Trump the authority to veto resolutions it passes and to unilaterally adopt resolutions or other directives to implement the Board of Peace's mission. It also makes him the final authority when it comes to interpreting anything in the charter. That effort, like the Anti-Weaponization Fund, involved Trump using his official governmental authority to compel people to give him control over a pot of billions of dollars that empowers him politically. And in case of the fund, the settlement Trump got from the government he runs also gives him a hugely significant personal benefit in the form of immunity for himself and his family. It might not be $10 billion in his pocket, but it's certainly the stuff of scandal.
In world news, Xi and Putin hail deepening ties amid global unrest. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin praised the strength of their relationship during talks, as Beijing in both countries seek to reinforce bilateral ties in the shadow of war in Ukraine and Iran. The two leaders signed a pact on deepening strategic cooperation on Wednesday before looking on as officials from both nations inked a series of other documents on topics ranging from trade and technology to railway construction. Putin said approximately 40 agreements had been reached during the visit, even as they didn't mention a key gas pipeline project. We have built a stable system of mutual trade that is protected from external influence and negative trends in global markets, Putin said, sitting next to Xi after talks between the two sides. The Chinese president said earlier that both nations are working on deepening political trust and strategic coordination. Discussions between the two leaders at the Great Hall of the People included the Middle East. State news agency Xinhua reported, with Xi adding urgency to his earlier calls for a ceasefire in a conflict that started with the U.S.-Israeli bombing of Iran and then spread across the region. Hours earlier, U.S. President Trump, who held a summit with Xi in Beijing last week, threatened to resume strikes on Iran in the coming days as part of the push for a deal to end the war. A comprehensive ceasefire is imperative, Xi said in Beijing. Restarting war is even more unacceptable, and adhering to negotiations is particularly important. Putin and Xi, who share a common desire for a multipolar world order to challenge the U.S. global dominance, attended a banquet in the Russian leader's honor before continuing their talks together over tea. The planned discussion over tea is one of the most important events of the visit, Yuri Yushkov, a Kremlin foreign policy aide, told reporters on Monday. We, like our Chinese friends, are interested in this tea meeting lasting as long as possible. That conversation is set to touch on Iran, Ukraine, relations with the U.S., and cooperation in international organizations, Yushkov told the Vesti news outlet on Wednesday. The leaders of Russia and China, two of Tehran's biggest backers, are meeting after Trump said he'd held off on a new bombardment of Iran planned for Tuesday at the request of Persian Gulf allies. The comments are increasingly raising the prospect of a return to active hostilities with Iran, which has so far refused to bow to Trump's demands to relinquish the remaining elements of its nuclear program after weeks of strikes that began in late February. Xi welcomed Putin on Tiananmen Square at the start of their summit, giving him the same treatment received days earlier by Trump. A 21-gun salute rang out as a military band played their national anthems, while dozens of children holding Russian and Chinese flags greeted them and shouted, "Welcome, welcome." Putin told Xi that Russia-China relations are at an unprecedented level and a model of partnership. The visit was formally timed to mark the 25th anniversary of a friendship and cooperation treaty between Russia and China. Calling Xi a dear friend, Putin said Russia remains a reliable supplier of energy to China. In the current tense situation on the international stage, our close cooperation is especially needed, he said. China and Russia could focus on long-term strategies and promote the development and revitalization of their respective countries, said Xi, according to the China Central Television. He added that their nations should also build a more just and reasonable global governance system in the face of rampant unilateral homogeny, the state broadcaster reported, making what appeared to be a veiled swipe at the USA. Over to you, Ruth.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 15 minutes past the hour, and we will go to our editorial. Excuse me. Disappointed but proud. On Tuesday morning, despite the balmy weather, Buffalo was plunged in gloom. Western New Yorkers and Buffalo Sabres fans are still processing their searing disappointment over the Montreal Canadiens' 3-2 overtime win against the Sabres in Game 7 of their second-round NHL playoff series. When the gloom passes, as it will, there should be enduring pride. Yes, for the Sabres, Monday's loss at KeyBank Center means the season is over. The Canadiens are in the Eastern Conference Final, where they face the Carolina Hurricanes. That realization is heartbreaking, but consider how far this team has come. In September, the Sabres entered the 25-26 season with odds makers, giving them a reasonable chance, 43%, of reaching the postseason. As the early season progressed, however, those odds fell considerably as the team headed toward the bottom of the NHL standings. But then, starting on December 9th, everything changed as the Sabres went on a 10-game winning streak. They rose to first in the Atlantic Division, and in March, for the first time in 14 seasons, the longest drought in NHL history, the Sabres clinched a playoff berth. This has been an amazing ride. It didn't end as everybody hoped, but Buffalo should still be thankful to the team that made this excitement possible. Sports writers have their theories on how the turnaround happened. The News' Rachel Lindsay wrote that the memorable 10-game streak this way: they developed consistency, started to understand their individual roles, and cut down on mistakes. They realized what it took to protect a 1 or 2 goal lead and learned how that losing a lead is unacceptable. They were playing under a new general manager and Jarmo Kekalainen. They turned consistency into sustainability. The Athletic's Shana Goldman also analyzed the Sabres' success, noting that it started with the Sabres' most valuable player, Rasmus Dahlin. This is a franchise-caliber defenseman who has been a cornerstone in Buffalo through all the chaos. He can be leaned on to absorb big minutes in any situation on both ends of the ice. The News' Mike Harrington saw this season, despite the disappointing ending, as boding well for the future. Here's the good news. This isn't a one-off. It should be the opening of a long window of contention. Let that be true. It's also important to remember that good news for the Sabres is good news for downtown Buffalo. Unlike the Buffalo Bills, the Sabres have a long game-crowded season with more than 40 games played at KeyBank Center. That means much-needed patrons bringing their energy and their dollars into surrounding bars, restaurants, and retailers. As Matt Kahn, owner of Big Ditch Brewing, located a mile from the arena, told the News' Francesca Bond, "We've been waiting for this since we've been open." Other nearby businesses offered Sabres game specials and giveaways with TVs provided throughout their establishments. At Canalside, there was food and beer trucks and on-stage entertainment. Away from downtown, watch parties have abounded at happily crowded taverns throughout western New York. In the village of Lancaster, the Merchant Association hosted a very successful hockey night with an outdoor viewing party on West Main Street for Game 3 of the opening round of the playoffs. And it's not just the businesses, it's the fellowship. As Bob Bruner, owner of J.P. Fitzgerald in Hamburg, said, "For those couple of hours, nobody was thinking of anything but just happiness and joy. We have a war going on. We're politically divided as a country. It brought total joy and happiness, and that's what it does. It's so contagious. Happiness and joy are what we all need. Thank you, Sabres, for bringing it. See you next season."
Now we move on to another voice, and today's topic is on health care. And this was submitted by Dr. Alana Krolikowski, who is the CEO of Jericho Road Community Health Center. And the headline is, Buffalo needs the Primary Care Investment Act. In Erie County, 12% of emergency room visits are potentially preventable. In zip codes 14203, 04, 11, 12, and 15, that rate is 3 to 5 times higher than the rest of the county. This should raise serious concerns. When patients are unable to access routine primary care, the emergency room becomes the default. But that comes at a high cost, both for patients and for the healthcare system. An emergency room visit averages $1,200, compared with $150 to $300 for a primary care visit. For many families, especially those without health insurance, that gap is life-changing financial strain layered on top of a health crisis that could have been prevented. In these same neighborhoods, there is a higher prevalence of high blood pressure and diabetes. In 14211, 45% of residents have high blood pressure, compared with 34% for the county. In 14204, 21% of residents were diagnosed with diabetes, compared with just 11% for the county. These disparities are concentrated in communities where most residents are people of color, with 2/3 identifying as Black. Limited access to primary care reinforces long-standing inequities in outcomes and life expectancy. Primary care is where these challenges can be addressed early through preventative screenings, diagnosis, and chronic disease management. Yet, across Buffalo, access to primary care is not guaranteed. In too many neighborhoods, there are not enough providers. Primary care receives only a small share of health care spending, even as demand grows, resulting in a system that drives higher costs and worse outcomes. We cannot afford to continue this way. Fortunately, there is a solution. New York's Primary Care Investment Act would require health plans to dedicate at least 12.5% of spending to primary care, rebalancing investment toward prevention, early intervention, and community-based care. This would expand the primary care workforce in disinvested neighborhoods, strengthen community health centers, and improve access to preventative services. The result would be more people receiving care before issues become crises. The data is clear and the need is urgent. The Primary Care Investment Act offers a long overdue path towards a healthier Buffalo. Now we take a look at our editorial cartoon for today, and this one is submitted by Mike Lukovich of the Creators Syndicate. And there is the image there, a very colorful image of the Capitol building with a whole bunch of people in the foreground carrying signs that say, "Don't tread on me, Trump," the Confederate flag, Trump, the Confederate flag, Trump, the Confederate flag. They're storming the Capitol building. And obviously this is in reference to January 6th a few years ago. And one of the person on top who's storming it is screaming out, "I used the congressional hallway as a restroom. Now where do I go to collect my Trump slush fund payout?" So I guess it's saying a little bit of the controversy that's involved with the suggested plan by Trump to pay these people for storming the Capitol building. I have my own opinion on it, but I'm not going to give it to you. You might be able to tell by my voice. We turn now to the national opinion pieces, and This one's by Allison Schrager. Not everyone will really need a Trump IRA. Years ago, I volunteered teaching financial literacy at a women's homeless shelter. I may have a doctorate in economics, but I was pretty useless. Being poor in America requires making complex financial decisions involving government benefits that I don't know much about. Still, I like to think I was of some use when it came to retirement saving, which is my specialty. I was surprised how many of the women had money in a retirement account from a former job. I gently suggested they make a hardship withdrawal, get out of the shelter, and stop worrying too much about retirement. They were resistant. One of my controversial opinions about retirement is that not everyone needs to save for it. It is conventional wisdom. Everyone should have access to a retirement account. Just last month, President Trump signed an executive order creating access to IRA accounts for lower earners, any individual earning less than $35,500 or couples less than $71,000. The Trump IRA plan is very generous, with up to a $1,000 in matching funds each year for some participants. In this era of wealth inequality, when market gains outpace income growth, almost any attempt to grow wealth and participation in the market among lower earners is very worthwhile. The growth of retirement accounts is a big reason both stock ownership and financial wealth are near all-time highs, even for middle-class Americans. Expanding access to higher-yielding access among lower earners could transform their lives and help them to share in a growing economy. But retirement accounts may not be the best way to achieve these goals. Low earners who qualify for full Social Security can expect to get more than 80% of their final salary as an annual benefit, adjusted for inflation. They may also qualify for other income and health benefits. Older Americans have the lowest rates of poverty because the U.S. has a fairly robust safety net for the elderly. Low earners are often no worse off than they were while working, sometimes better, even without much money in the bank. But their working years can be financially precarious. In 2022, the median financial wealth of a single person earning less than $35,000 was $1,000, about $2,000 for a married household earning $70,000. About 25% of those in the income groups have hardly any savings at all. Clearly, $1,000 would be transformative. At the same time, the lower income people are more financially vulnerable to disruptive events, such as divorce, unemployment, or even car repair. They need liquid savings instead of retirement assets. Many of the state-sponsored retirement accounts are Roth IRAs, which means savers can take the money out if they need it. A Roth may be a better structure than a traditional IRA for the Trump retirement plan, though offering a match on a liquid account complicates a program intended to build wealth. Building retirement savings for low-income Americans is a hard problem because they often need their wealth before they retire. Between the president's actions to expand access to retirement accounts and his plan to create accounts for children, this administration is working hard to reduce wealth inequity, and more directly than any government benefit that discourages work.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is approximately 29 minutes past the article, and we will go to our second opinion piece. It's written by Connor Zen, who is from Bloomberg Opinion. San Francisco's luxury housing boom is an urgent warning. San Francisco's luxury housing market is booming, fueled by the stunning wealth created by the nascent artificial intelligence industry and a record stock market. Sure, the California city has always been an outlier relative to the rest of the real estate market, but the recent developments, nevertheless, suggest the modest gains in affordability we've seen in the U.S. may be nipped in the bud. San Francisco's luxury market is characterized these days by bidding wars and scarce inventory. If history is any guide, we'll likely see this wealth-driven momentum broaden out. It will ripple through Manhattan and Miami's luxury segments. The truly rich will start to price out the merely affluent, who will take their budgets to less pricey neighborhoods, or perhaps to other metros that often appeal to coastal residents seeking a little more bang for their buck, places including Austin, Texas, Denver, and Nashville, Tennessee. Ultimately, this is not what the housing market needs to return to health. The AI boom threatens to crowd out other parts of the economy and casts doubt on whether the grind toward affordability will continue should tech stocks keep powering ahead. It doesn't offer much hope or opportunity for younger or more middle-class Americans looking to buy homes without large nest eggs to rely on. Over the past 2 years, affordability has gradually improved thanks to a mix of wage growth and lower mortgage rates. A number of metros in the South and West have also seen price declines, some fairly substantial, though property values have been more resilient elsewhere. But the University of Michigan's consumer sentiment surveys continue to show weak home buying conditions, signaling households need to gain more ground to catch up to the COVID-era price surge. For those in AI or with large financial portfolios, it's a different story. Jobs in AI command a premium, not to mention stock options that some now have the opportunity to cash out. And anyone invested in the equity market has benefited hugely by the S&P 500 index's 90% gain since the end of 2022. The total value of the U.S. stock market has increased by around $33 trillion over that time, wealth held predominantly by the top 10% of Americans. Nowhere is this wealth more apparent than in San Francisco. Luxury home sales jumped 22% from a year earlier in the 3 months through March, with active listings down 15%, according to Redfin. Since the launch of OpenAI's ChatGPT, luxury home prices in the San Francisco Bay Area have increased over 13%, whereas prices have fallen in the most affordable Bay Area zip codes. The most obvious explanation is the AI effect, though Redfin also points to a return to office and a lack of inventory driving the overall market. Condo prices, for example, climbed 24.4% in March from a year earlier, the sharpest increase since 2013. There's also a creeping fear of missing out as would-be buyers look ahead to the initial public offerings of OpenAI and Anthropic PBC, which are expected to unlock billions of dollars of wealth for employees and investors. More than 600 current and former AI employees sold their shares last October, collectively making $6.6 billion, according to the Wall Street Journal. This is very much a top-heavy boom. Overall employment is recovering in the region after a post-COVID slump, but job creation has been modest. Employment in the San Francisco-Oakland-Fremont metropolitan area is up by just 11,000 since the bottom last June, and remains nearly 100 jobs below the level in February 2020. More broadly, the U.S. economy has added just 20,000 jobs per month over the last year, and wage growth has slowed to 3.6%. Relative to wages, homes don't look very affordable, but compared to a stock market that has nearly doubled since 2022, homes look like a bargain for some. San Francisco is the most extreme example of this. But it's not the only place where stock market wealth has been much greater than overall economic or job growth over the past few years. The South Florida and Palm Beach luxury markets continue to see wealth migration. In New York, the big Wall Street banks are benefiting from booming financial markets and an expected strong year for deal-making. Compared with last year, Manhattan has seen a 40% increase in ultra-luxury home sales in the first 16 weeks of the year. The Real Deal reported last month, geopolitical instability may also be making New York more attractive, according to the Housing Wire report. Contrast this K-shaped housing market with a real estate recovery that played out in the 2010s. At the time, job growth, particularly knowledge jobs in the big coastal metros, and falling home prices combined with low mortgage rates to create a durable recovery. The U.S. added employment at a solid clip throughout the decade, and while there were a few dips in housing market activity, the pace of existing home sales increased from an annual rate of 4 million in the early 2010s to around 5.5 million for most of the second half of the decade. Today, would-be buyers are still trying to get ahead of prices that rocketed during the COVID-era housing boom, pricing out many households. Unfortunately for them, the affordability may stall at current levels. Interest rate cuts no longer look likely in the near future, and entry-level home builders aren't going to build more homes in response to a surge in demand for luxury houses. What's needed for housing affordability to improve further is a more balanced economic expansion, driven by job and wage growth rather than the stock market. That seems unlikely, as long as the euphoria for AI carries on.
And our final opinion piece comes to us from Garrett Granger, and the headline is, Utah's housing model is the wrong way to go on homelessness. A controversial plan in Utah to build remote homeless campus is being hailed in some quarters as a bold new approach to the nation's soaring homeless population. The plan, developed in the wake of President Trump's executive order on homelessness that was called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets, reflects a broader national shift towards centralized services, stricter enforcement of laws against living on the street, and expanded use of involuntary psychiatric and substance use treatment against unhoused individuals. Supporters see Utah's initiative as a bold alternative to the ballooning rate of street homelessness. Critics see a costly coercive model that departs from the evidence on what actually reduces homelessness. A new report sponsored by the Corporation for Supportive Housing raises serious doubts about whether the project can deliver on its promises. The proposed facility, located 7 miles outside of Salt Lake City, would combine multiple services on a single campus. It would be a large emergency shelter, an accountability center providing involuntary substance use treatment, and a psychiatric unit with hundreds of beds. State officials have described the project as a way to reduce homelessness while improving public safety. Planning documents alternately describe the target population as people experiencing homelessness broadly and more narrowly as high utilizers of emergency and law enforcement services. There is little publicity available to show how many people would meet that definition. Drawing on evidence from comparable projects in other cities, the authors find no consistent relationship between large, centralized facilities and reduction in homelessness. Where declines have occurred, they appear to be driven by investments in permanent housing. That finding aligns with a large body of research on homelessness interventions. In a review of 42 studies, the report concludes that involuntary or coercive treatment models do not outperform permanent housing programs and may in some cases prolong episodes of homelessness. Long-term success depends heavily on access to stable housing after discharge. This raises an obvious question. If existing approaches centered on housing and voluntary services are more effective, what problem is the Utah model solving? One often cited answer is cost. Proponents point to analysis of similar facilities, such as San Antonio's Haven for Hope, which claim substantial public savings through reduced use of emergency services. However, the report promoted by the Corporation for Supportive Housing cast doubt on those claims, identifying methodological flaws in a widely cited cost-benefit analysis. The study also suggests Utah's own projections may significantly underestimate the true cost of the project. State officials have estimated construction costs at roughly $75 million, with annual operating expenses at around $34 million. Based on comparable facilities, the report estimates those figures could be closer to $165 million in construction and $53 million in annual operations, excluding about $90 million more in associated public services and on-site psychiatric care. At that cost, the authors estimate equivalent resources could support 691 households in permanent supportive housing at just 30% of the ongoing cost. Beyond effectiveness and cost, the report also raises concerns about feasibility. Legal questions remain about the use of involuntary commitment at the proposed scale. Long-term funding for operations has not been secured, and local service providers may lack the capacity to deliver the level of intensive care the model requires. The Utah proposal reflects a broader shift in federal and state thinking about homelessness, one that emphasizes visibility, control, and short-term management over long-term housing stability. Policies that prioritize containment over housing may reduce the visibility of homelessness without addressing its underlying causes. Decades of research show that permanent supportive housing paired with voluntary services is the most effective and cost-efficient way to reduce homelessness. While policymakers are right to demand better outcomes, building larger, more restrictive systems is not the same as creating better ones.
And now to our finance pages. Race to produce jet fuel likely to cause gas pinch. And this is a Bloomberg News article. A global supply crunch has U.S. refineries producing jet fuel at a record pace, while skewing output away from gasoline, setting up a potential transport fuels production clash during the peak summer travel period. Refiners in the Gulf Coast are some of the most price-sensitive in the world, tailoring their petroleum product output to make as much money as possible. With the war in Iran upending energy markets and stockpiles, excuse me, that's meant they have ramped up jet fuel in recent months to capture a price spike. Gasoline output as a percentage of production, meanwhile, is well below seasonal norms. U.S. refiners have been maximizing jet fuel production at the expense of gasoline and diesel yields, said Natalia Losada, senior oil products analyst at consultancy Energy Aspects. Gasoline is going to need to compete for yield going into the summer. The decisions refiners make in the coming months will also have consequences outside North America. The European Union and UK, which usually receive large volumes of diesel and jet fuel from the Middle East, have been importing bigger than usual amounts from the Gulf Coast, according to data from Fortexa. Any reduction in those supplies, particularly while Middle East tensions continue, would be bad news for the region. The U.S. has produced more than 2 million barrels a day of jet fuel in the 4 most recent weeks of data from the Energy Information Administration. It's the first time on record the U.S. has made more than 2 million barrels a day for consecutive weeks, let alone 4 in a row. Now, the summer road trip season is approaching when gasoline demand traditionally rises. If U.S. refiners end up skewing more of their output toward gasoline, it would force a reduction in yields of other much-needed fuels. That could prompt the market to increase prices for whichever fuel is most needed. It turns into a bidding war, said Eugene Lindell, head of refined products at consultancy FGE. Gasoline wins now, and then Jet says, "Hey, listen, Buster, I see you're 20 and I raise you." Oil processors such as Valero Energy Corp and Marathon Petroleum Corporation have brought on extra jet fuel refining capacity, in some cases at facilities that typically don't make the product. There's a similar dynamic in Europe, where oil processors are in the max jet mode, Franz Everts, a senior Shell executive, recently said. U.S. gasoline stockpiles are at their lowest seasonal level since 2014, while imports are at their lowest seasonal level this century. Meanwhile, the margin for making gasoline is sitting around $50 a barrel, the highest it's been since the peak of the 2022 energy crunch. In short, the market is calling for barrels. The refiners are going to make the product that makes them the most money, said Andy Lipow, president of Lipow Oil Associates. If that means they're making less gasoline from a refining standpoint, that's the way it is. In the summer, when demand is at its highest, refineries typically get less gasoline out of a barrel of crude, said Susan Bell, Senior Vice President of Downstream Research at Rystad Energy. That's because in the winter, refiners blend in more additives that optimize fuel for cold weather. But in the summer, they blend less, meaning that a gallon of gasoline requires more crude. If refiners maximize gasoline production at that time of the year, Bell said, they need to steal materials that typically go into jet fuel and diesel. Both jet yield and diesel will fall, she said.
Also in financial news, bond market is flashing a warning sign for the economy. Taken from President Trump, stocks and commodities can throw easily ignored tantrums, but when the bond market gets yippy, you pay attention. Ultimately, it took a sharp bond market sell-off in April of 25 to get Trump to pump the brakes on his sweeping reciprocal tariff agenda. Once again, the bond traders are barking, but this time it's not clear whether Trump can do much to calm the market anytime soon. The bond market is basically reacting to the uncertainty created by oil prices, and Trump seems to not know how to get out of the problem that he put us in, said Daniel Alpert. Put another way, bond traders are starting to think that the recent inflation spike, largely a result of the war of cutting off the oil flow with the Strait of Hormuz, is not a short-term thing as Trump has claimed. It's a problem for all of us, investors and normies alike. Right now, bond prices are getting weighed down by a bunch of economic concerns, including rising inflation, national debt, outpacing economic growth, consumer debt, the cost of the Iranian war, potential rate hikes, and the cost of financing AI. That means it'll cost the government, that means taxpayers, more to finance the national debt, leaving less for social services. And because mortgage rates, auto loans, and credit cards are all pegged to the 10-year Treasury yield, consumers end up paying more to finance those necessities. This can slow the economic growth and potentially trigger a recession, though that doesn't appear to be anywhere close to just now. The bond market anxiety was so acute on Tuesday The 30-year U.S. Treasury yield hit just 5.2%, its highest level since 2007. It even managed to pierce the euphoria around the tech stocks that have driven the market to record highs in recent weeks.
As part of our newspaper reading, we can now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Cavo, Roselia. Gorski, Linda. Huffman, James R. McGee, William C. Morrow, Carol Ann Nee Norton. Torrey, Kathleen D. Nee Michaels. Also, Barney Frank, a quick-witted Democrat who gave his name to a landmark financial reform bill after the economic crisis of 2007 to 9. Along with then Senator Chris Dodd, Frank spearheaded 2010 legislation that tightened banking regulations and consumer protections to avoid a repeat of the 2007 financial crash and subsequent Great Recession. Known as the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, the law led to new rules on the previously unregulated off-exchange derivatives market and set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to shield consumers from predatory and abusive practices. He was 86. If you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
And now it's time to take a look at our royal stars and see what the horoscope holds for us today. Now, if today is your birthday, May 21st, you are totally committed to whatever excites you. You have tremendous physical and intellectual energy. You're attentive and caring. This is the final year of a 9-year cycle. Let go of people, places, and things that have held you back. It's time to do some internal and external house cleaning. Now, the stars show what kind of day you're going to have. 5 stars is dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, and 1 difficult. Now, before I start to read them, I'm going to tell you that before I came here, I was telling Ruth I'm having a horrible day. Just a lot of things going wrong. And I have never seen a horoscope this bad. Nothing is above a 3-star. It's all 3 and 2 stars. This is not a good day. And I'm living proof of that. So here we go. Aries, you're lucky you got 3 stars today. This is a playful day with lots of energy for sports. However, be careful about anger and getting caught up in a power struggle with a friend, group, or a team. Tonight, be playful. Taurus, 2 stars. A clash of egos with parents and authority figures are classic today. In fact, family disputes will be tough to avoid. Tonight, relax. Gemini, 3 stars. Avoid getting caught up in squabbles with siblings, relatives, and daily contacts today, which frankly are just power struggles. Tonight, a gentle conversation. Cancer, 3 stars. Money squabbles are hard to avoid today, especially if you're dealing with a friend or a member of your group or team. Tonight, check your money. Leo, 2 stars. Today, the moon is in your sign, but it's at odds with both Pluto and Mars. Not good. That's not mine, but it's pretty close. You might find yourself at odds with parents, bosses, authority figures, and the police. Tonight, you're strong. Virgo, 3 stars. With the sun at the top of your chart now, you make a fabulous impression on others. Why blow it by getting caught up in controversial arguments, power struggles at work, or something to do with your health or a pet? Tonight, peace and quiet. Libra, 3 stars. Parents will have to be patient with their kids today. Likewise, romantic partners have to be patient with each other to avoid arguments about expenses, shared possessions, friends, and social occasions. Tonight, be friendly. Scorpio, 2 stars. Avoid controversy and arguments with parents and bosses today. Likewise, avoid disputes with partners, spouses, and close friends, because this will ruin your day. Tonight, be modest. Sagittarius, 3 stars. Today is going to be challenging in that you might encounter arguments with siblings, relatives, and neighbors. Tonight, explore. Capricorn, 3 stars. This is a tough day for romance as well as dealing with your kids. Even social outings will be challenged because in some aspects of your life, arguments are waiting for you. Tonight, check your finances. Aquarius, 2 stars. Tread carefully today. Those who are closest to you, including family members, might be looking for a fight. Tonight, listen. And finally, Pisces, 3 stars. Focus on home, family, fun outings, sports, and good times with your kids today. Tonight, work. And after reading this, Ruth, I got to tell you, now I know why the cops had so many cars pulled over on my drive to the studio this morning. I'm going to watch that speed limit today.
That's a good plan for today and every day. Today in history, in 1881, Blanche Bruce became the first black Register of the Treasury, named to the post just months after being the first black person to complete a 6-year term in the U.S. Senate. He was also the only former enslaved person to preside over the U.S. Senate, which he did on February 14, 1879, during debate over a bill to exclude Chinese immigrants. I didn't know anything about that.
Really?
Yeah, that's amazing. In 1881, the American National Red Cross was founded by Clara Barton, and in 1901, Connecticut became the first state to pass a speed limit law, Ted. Speed limit law, dictating that no motor vehicle could exceed 12 miles per hour in cities or 15 miles per hour outside city limits.
I think I walk faster.
I think I do too. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for May 21st. You're on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ted Majacki
and Ruth Nowotniak.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
And we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News in this second hour. And we begin now with some local news from the city and the region. The state lets the NSEG, New York State Gas and Electric, temporarily boost gas and electric rates. State regulators have granted a temporary rate increase for New York State Electric and Gas as work continues on the utility's request for a much bigger permanent increase in delivery charges. The temporary rate increase is expected to result in a 0.2% increase in bills for NYSEG residential electric customers and a 1.7% increase for natural gas customers. The temporary rate hike would increase NYSEG's electric revenues by 3.7%. The temporary rates go into effect June 1st. The State Public Service Commission said it expects final rates to be set in the coming months. NYSEG is seeking a rate increase that would raise a typical residential customer's bill by $33 a month, or 26%. The rate case is unfolding at a time when soaring energy costs have become a pressing issue. It's been over a decade since the Public Service Commission approved a temporary rate hike for a utility. The additional time this provides us will likely lead to a better long-term outcome than what we could achieve through the original schedule on the rate case, said Rory Christian, the PSC chair, at a recent meeting. The PSC also approved temporary rate hikes for electric and natural gas customers of Rochester Gas and Electric, NYSEG, and RG&E, both subsidiaries of Avangrid. Christian said several factors are impacting the rate case, including the complexity of reviewing 4 different rate requests, 2 each from NYSEG and RG&E, at the same time. Christian said these are among the biggest increase requested by any utility in recent history, and the case has generated nearly 27,000 written public comments, an extraordinarily high number, as well as voluminous transcripts from 9 in-person and 2 virtual public statement hearings. This was not a typical rate case in any way, Christian said. Regulators are taking into account concerns about affordability and inflation, but also the need to balance those with the need to maintain reliability and the various system capacity constraints that need to be addressed due to much needed investments, he said. PSC staff experts have recommended a rate hike that would increase NYSEG's electric revenues by 5.4%, or $66.9 million. The PSC staff also said the recommendation should be reviewed in the context of current economic difficulties that customers are experiencing. Those recommendations are not binding on the Commission, but are considered by the PSC as it makes its rate decisions. The PSC staff said the Commission may need to consider further reductions in the rates that it has recommended. Dakin Lakes, the chief administrative law judge for the Department of Public Service, said rate cases continue to grow in the public conversation and consciousness, and that public statement hearings have been marked by attendees expressing increasing anger and frustration. Stories about utility rates and services continue to be told in both conventional and social media, LeCaque said. Elected officials have also increased not just their own public and press comments, but as active party participants in our rate cases. The State Department of Public Service, the staff arm of the PSC, and other parties to the rate case have been in litigation with NYSEG and RG&E over the proposed rate increases for several months. Implementing temporary rates leaves open the option of resuming settlement discussions among the parties, the Department of Public Service said. Avangrid said in a statement that it was reviewing the PSC's order for temporary rate hikes. We appreciate the leadership of the PSC and look forward to continuing to work with staff and other parties as the process moves forward, Avangrid said. Sustained investment in grid infrastructure helps rein in future costs and supports ongoing system reliability, especially as New York's communities and economies continue to grow, they said. In June of 2025, NYSEG sought permission for a one-year rate hike that would have increased the typical customer's bill by $33 a month or 24%. At the time, the utility said the increase was necessary to make up for previous increases in electric delivery charges that were not sufficient to cover the higher costs of recovering from major storms and accounting for unpaid customer bills. In addition, the company cited rising costs to trim vegetation and trees from its network and investments necessary to upgrade its system and equipment. The company, last June, said it hoped to negotiate an agreement with the PSC that would last as long as 5 years, allowing for higher delivery charges to be spread over a longer period and provide more cost predictability for its customers.
What's at stake in the ongoing fight over city borrowing? This is by Justin Sondel, a news staff reporter. City Controller Barbara Miller Williams is vowing to appeal her fight over borrowing money for the City of Buffalo to the state's highest court, the Court of Appeals, after losing a second time at the appellate division. She has argued that, as the city's elected controller, she has the power to refuse to borrow money on the city's behalf if she thinks it is a poor financial decision. After former Mayor Christopher Scanlon and Common Council member Mitch Nowakowski sued Miller Williams last year, the state Supreme Court judge ruled that Miller Williams can't make a unilateral decision about borrowing money over the objections of the Common Council and mayor, who had already approved the borrowing for the city's capital budget, which pays for roads, building repairs, vehicles, and similar expenditures. Miller Williams appealed the ruling and lost. Her next move, to ask the Court of Appeals to step in, may be ambitious. Since the appellate division was unanimous when it ruled against her, the Court of Appeals may decline to hear her case. If that happens, the appellate division ruling stands, and presumably Miller Williams would then be forced to borrow the money so the city can begin on its long to-do list of construction and repair projects that have now built up over the past 2 years because the city has not had the funds to pay for them. Miller Williams has until May 27th to file with the Court of Appeals. Here are 3 things to know about the ongoing case and what it means for city residents, workers, and visitors. The arguments. Normally, when the Common Council passes a capital budget that will require borrowing, the controller sells municipal bonds to investors. The cash raised from the sale pays for the projects, and the city repays the principal and interest to the bondholders over time. Miller Williams says a clause in the city charter that states that the controller shall superintend the city's finances gives her the authority to refuse to borrow in ways her office views as irresponsible. Last summer, Scanlon began a public pressure campaign to sway Miller Williams to bond for all projects in the $110 million 2025 capital budget passed in late 2024. Scanlon, then the mayor, touted the largest capital budget in history as a major investment in the city and Buffalo Public Schools' crumbling infrastructure, and as a boon to the local economy through a significant increase in construction work and other economic activity. But Miller Williams, citing an internal debt cap set by her office of $28 million, had said she will not borrow past that limit, as it will add to the debt service paid by taxpayers for the life of the bonds. after her refusal to borrow prevented work from going forward for most of the 2025 construction season. Scanlon and Nowakowski sued, with decisions from 2 courts handed down since then supporting their arguments that the debt cap set by Miller Williams is advisory, and her only role in the borrowing process is properly administering the bonds. The city passed a $94 million capital budget last year for 2026. Miller Williams said she again will not borrow for projects beyond $28 million. This week, Mayor Sean Ryan submitted more than $25 million in bond resolutions for projects from that list, which were approved by the council. Miller Williams said her attorneys have acknowledged that the appeal to the Court of Appeals is unlikely to be successful. Still, she says she owes it to the taxpayers who have urged her to exhaust every potential legal avenue in her fight against exceeding her cap. The timeline. The wait to hear whether the Court of Appeals will take up her case will likely push into October, with an average time for an answer from the court last year standing at 142 days, according to annual reports. If the controller files her appeal next week, that would mean there will be likely no additional borrowing for projects before the fall, effectively preventing any progress on completing projects or purchases this year. Scanlon and Nowakowski have said the delays already cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars as material and labor costs rise, while also delaying desperately needed infrastructure projects. Ryan, who's consistently called attention to the city's crumbling infrastructure and buildings since taking office in January, said that the city's artificial debt diet under Miller Williams and her predecessor, former Controller Mark Schroeder, setting low borrowing limits, even though a period where interest rates were at historic lows, played a major part in the disinvestment that has led to so many city-owned properties being in disrepair. In debt. One refrain that Miller Williams has consistently pointed to as a reason to be cautious about additional borrowing is the $271 million in borrowed money that has not been put to use for projects approved in capital budgets, the oldest of which goes back to 2015. Those bonds are costing taxpayers in interest payments while some of the projects stagnate for years, she has said. Miller Williams has urged the Ryan and Scanlon administrations to spend down those issued bonds, getting previously approved projects done before bonding for new projects in excess of her office's internal cap. Still, the total debt the city holds is less than 10% of the total it is allowed to borrow under the state constitution. They could borrow more than $1.5 billion more before reaching that cap, and far less by percentage than other large cities across the state. Borrowing for expensive infrastructure projects and equipment that provides public benefit over long periods of time is common and is widely considered a best practice for municipalities. Both Ryan and Scanlon have argued that for far too long the city borrowed too little, especially during a period of historically low interest rates in the 2010s under former Mayor Byron Brown. As a result, the city is now playing catch-up on dozens of infrastructure projects and equipment purchases with no reserve funds available to pay for those needs. Ryan has said he plans to borrow to fix community centers and purchase plows, but the controller's refusal to go forward with approved borrowing may throw a roadblock into that plan. He has said he may pursue borrowing through the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, which has a better credit rating than the city and would likely get more favorable terms on loans. But if Miller Williams does file her motion to have the case heard by the State Court of Appeals by the Wednesday deadline, projects from the last 2 capital budgets that have not already been bonded out likely will not start until at least next year.
Our next article deals with some financial decisions being made at SUNY Fredonia. SUNY Fredonia is cutting additional programs as the school works to reduce its structural deficit. SUNY Fredonia has identified 10 undergraduate, 4 graduate, and 7 minor programs for deactivization, the university said Tuesday. All current and incoming accepted enrolled students will be able to complete their studies in those programs. SUNY Fredonia said that when the fall semester begins in August, about 111 students are scheduled to be enrolled in the effective programs as majors and about 60 will be enrolled in associated minors, representing less than 5% of Fredonia's total student population. Our collective work as a campus to close our deficit is grounded in our responsibility to ensure SUNY Fredonia continues as a strong and sustainable institution for our students and our community. By balancing financial discipline and strategies to grow our enrollment, we've made significant progress in reducing our deficit by nearly half. These and other actions keep us on a path towards long-term financial stability. The 10 impacted undergraduate programs are communication, audio radio, cooperative engineering, economics, international studies, mathematics, applied mathematics, physics, adolescent education, and political science. The 4 impacted graduate programs are biology, mathematics, 7 through 12 music composition, and music therapy. Fredonia will also discontinue minors in applied mathematics, data science, mathematics, statistics, physics, economics, and political science. SUNY Fredonia had an enrollment of about 3,150 students for the 2025-26 school year. The university held its commitment last weekend. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 16 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to the sports section, and there's a big headline across. It says decisions, decisions, decisions. And the first one is that the Sabres signed head coach Lindy Ruff to a 2-year contract extension. Lindy Ruff is staying put in his pursuit of the Stanley Cup. The Buffalo Sabres announced on Wednesday that their head coach is coming back after signing a 2-year contract extension. Ruff, who is 66 years old, led the Sabres to a 109-point season, their first Atlantic Division title, and their first trip to the Stanley Cup playoffs since 2011. The season ended on Monday with a loss to Montreal in overtime. Ruff is one of 3 finalists for this year's Jack Adams Award as the National Hockey League Coach of the Year, along with John Cooper of Tampa Bay and Dan Muse of Pittsburgh. He won the award with the Sabres in 2006 and led to a President's Trophy in 2007. Ruff was the only current National Hockey League coach without a contract for next season. This season, Sabres engineered a huge turnaround under Ruff and new general manager Jarmo Kekalainen, becoming just the 5th team in history to win a division by overcoming a standings deficit of 8 or more points. From December 9th to the end of the season, Buffalo led all National Hockey League teams in wins with 39 and points with 83. Ruff coached the Sabres from 1997 to 2013, reaching the Stanley Cup Finals in 1999, and then rejoined the club in 2024 after having some stints as the top man in Dallas and in New Jersey. Ruff is the franchise all-time leader with 657 wins, and his 950 in the National Hockey League could become the 4th man in history to reach 1,000 as soon as next season. He ranks only behind Montreal legend Scotty Bowman and current Anaheim coach Joel Quenneville and Florida's Paul Maurice. Ruff ranks 3rd all-time in Gates coach with 1,938 and will join Bowman and Maurice in the 2,000 club next season.
Tuck faces unknown future as contract is set to expire. This is by Rachel Lindsay, a new staff reporter. Alex Tuch had his exit interview Wednesday morning, 2 days after the Buffalo Sabres season ended with a Game 7 loss to the Montreal Canadiens. He's a right-wing Sabre. He's a Sabres right wing. Said that General Manager Jarmo Kekalainen expressed his desire to have him return to the team. The question becomes, will he? Tuch is set to become an unrestricted free agent after his contract with the Sabres expires June 30th. He has played for the Sabres for the last 5 seasons. Tuch, 30, is in the final year of a 7-year contract that has an average annual value of $4.75 million. He said he didn't have a timeline for when he wanted to make a decision on a new contract. That decision-making process includes factors such as staying with the Sabres or joining a new team, the length of the contract, and the financial terms. Tuch helped lead the Sabres to their first playoff berth since 2011. The Montreal Canadiens beat them in 7 games in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, winning the final game of the series 3-2 in overtime. A native of Baldwinsville, Tuch scored 33 goals, had 33 assists, was plus 24, blocked 90 shots, and had 82 hits in 79 games this season. However, his production dipped in the second round of the playoffs. After scoring 4 goals with 3 assists in 6 games against the Boston Bruins in the first round, he was held without a point against the Canadiens. It was obvious more than 10 months ago that the Sabres were going to find some way to make their best offer to Tuch, a two-way forward who is expected to be the most sought-after player in this year's class of free agents. Tuch recounted the process of negotiating a new contract during the season on Wednesday, the second day of the team's breakup days. Winger Adrian Klempe's contract with the Los Angeles Kings is the most obvious measuring stick for what Tuch should do once he agrees to a new contract with the team. Kemp signed an 8-year contract extension with the Kings in November, worth $10.6 million annually. 2 days after the loss to the Canadiens, Tuch wasn't immediately looking ahead at upcoming contract negotiations. It hasn't been 48 hours since we lost, he said, dealing with that. Just trying to hang out with my teammates. It gets you quick losing Game 7. I don't have a timeline right now. I don't really have anything for you. I'm sorry. The most successful Sabres season in 15 years is finished, and Tuch helped establish a new standard. As left wing Jason Zucker explained, making the playoffs is now an expectation. Tuch strived to set that standard, and if it was up to Tuch's teammates, they'd want him to stay in Buffalo. Tage Thompson doesn't just know Tuch as a line mate or as a teammate. He's also his neighbor in Clarence. Ultimately, that decision is up to Tuch, who is expected to weigh many solid offers. I wish I could tell you the future, he said. I really just don't know how it's going to unfold. It's something that I'm going to have to do a lot of thinking about. I love it here. I love my time here. I love playing hockey here. I'm going to do whatever is best for myself and my family. That's all that's in my power and consideration.
Well, it's time to look a little bit at the Buffalo Bills, and there's a little bit of a feature article about the Bills Coleman. As it says, year 3 is make or break. Keon Coleman has heard and seen the criticism. The Buffalo Bills receiver was cited by owner Terry Pegula as a draft pick made by general manager and president of football operations Brandon Beane to appease Sean McDermott's coaching staff. Retired NFL players have scolded Coleman on national television and popular podcasts. Even the Los Angeles Chargers used Coleman as the butt of a joke during a schedule release video that garnered 17 million views on X. I just don't care, Coleman told a group of reporters on Tuesday following the second OTA practice at One Bills Drive. None of them going to come lace them up and try to stand in front of me. At the end of the day, my job is to come out here, put my cleats on, strap them up, and prove my worth here. Coleman did not make any excuses while speaking to reporters for the first time since the Bills lost to the Denver Broncos in the AFC divisional round. His response, when asked to evaluate his 2025 season, said, unacceptable. Does he want to speak to Pegula about the comment that fueled trade speculation this offseason? His response, what's there to talk about? I'm here. Past mistakes taught Coleman's actions mean more than words. Bean, first-year coach Joe Brady, and superstar quarterback Josh Allen do not need to hear the receiver promise to be on time and productive for the season. They do not need to hear that he learned from his benching last season. They need to see it from Coleman. Their trust will not be earned through a first few practices or one training camp. It will take him acting like a professional every day for everyone at One Bills Drive to believe that the mistakes won't happen again. Coleman's not naive. He understands what is at stake entering his third NFL season. I mean, for me, it's make or break, Coleman acknowledged. You are bad. You might not be here. Simple as that. Simple put, man. Like I said, I know I'm capable of doing things. So if I fall short of that, I'm doing myself a disservice and my team. The Bills know how Coleman can perform. His potential was one reason why McDermott exercised extreme patience while the 2024 second-round pick learned that life in the NFL is vastly different than Florida State or Michigan State. Nobody is going to micromanagement Coleman in Orchard Park. It's his responsibility to be where he's supposed to be. Coaches are not interested in motivating professional athletes to work hard. Coleman's work ethic is evident on the practice field, but attention to detail and maturity were issues that caused McDermott to finally bench Coleman from the lineup for the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 11 last season. 4 times Coleman was scratched. The benching occurred several weeks after McDermott kept him off the field for the opening drive of a game against the New England Patriots. Coleman was the best receiver on the field in training camp last summer. He had contested catches, run after the catch ability, acrobatic sideline grabs. The highlight reel played during the draft in 2024 came to life at St. John Fisher University. It was an encouraging response after Bean and McDermott expressed disappointment several months earlier with how Coleman performed in his return from injury as a rookie. Who did Allen target most of Week 1 last September when the Bills trailed by 15 points in the fourth quarter? Coleman. He caught 8 passes on 11 targets for 112 yards and a touchdown. A breakout season seemed inevitable, but Coleman did not surpass 46 receiving yards again until Week 17. He was targeted just 3 times in the divisional round when injuries to receivers Gabe Davis and Tyrell Shavers depleted the Bills' depth chart. Coleman has the talent. He has lacked consistency, though, and Brady prioritized receivers during the playoffs who Allen trusted to be where they were supposed to be. It's time to put it all together, Coleman admitted. Potential things, I don't really care to hear them. It's time for me to just put it out there on the field.
And to high school, St. Joe's captures 10th straight title. Mason Snyder had the ball on his stick with 9.1 seconds left, and St. Joe's clinging to a tie it had spent most of the afternoon chasing. This is boys lacrosse, by the way. He didn't hesitate. Snyder scored the go-ahead goal past the Canisius goalkeeper, sending the St. Joe's sideline into pandemonium, and delivered the Marauders their 10th consecutive Monsignor Martin Boys Lacrosse Championship with a 13-12 victory Tuesday at Canisius University's Dembski Sports Complex. It was the second straight year Snyder scored the winner in a league championship game. The junior scored twice in the fourth quarter to tie it, and then won a game St. Joe's led for a combined total of fewer than 2 minutes. St. Joe's grabbed a 2-1 lead in the first quarter on a goal from Elijah Freeman, but Canisius tied it 48 seconds later. The Marauders went back in front to open the second quarter, only to lose the lead again within a minute. From that point forward, they spent the entire second half trailing or knotted, chasing a Canisius team that built a 5-2 advantage and pushed the margin to 10-8 heading into the fourth quarter. Each time St. Joe's threatened to pull away early, Canisius had an answer. Each time Canisius looked like it might put the game away in the second half, the Marauders answered right back. St. Joe's chipped away in the fourth, tying it at 10 and again at 11, before the game turned on a sequence that tested every nerve on both benches. Canisius's Braxton Kilgour scored a go-ahead goal with 33 seconds left to put the Crusaders up 12-11. The St. Joe's sideline had barely processed it when an illegal procedure call gave the Marauders the ball. Hayden Wells buried the equalizer with 25 seconds remaining. St. Joe's won the ensuing face-off, called timeout with 19 seconds left, and Snyder delivered the winner out of a break. Officials checked his stick afterward, and it was clean.
Wow. Talk about nerves there.
Yes, that sounded like an exciting game to watch.
Yes. You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 31 minutes after the hour. Now, if you're like me and you're listening to today's horoscope of those few stars, let's see what Eric has to give us in his advice today. And this headline is, Wife's hair keeps ending up in her husband's lunches.
Oh.
I tell you, it's not a good day. Dear Eric, my wife is retired and does the majority of grocery shopping and cooking. For the past year or so, she has also insisted on packing me a lunch to take to work. I'm a teacher, and bringing lunch has been part of my daily routine for years. There's no time in the school day to go out to lunch. She packs things like soups, salads, or leftovers from dinner the night before. This is very generous, and I really appreciate that she wants to help make my work week a little bit easier. Sometimes she even makes handheld breakfasts to go. I've never asked for help with meal prep, but we've just sort of fallen into this routine. While I always express my gratitude, what I haven't said is that I sometimes find a hair in my meals. My wife's hair is distinctive looking. It's longish, curly, and gray. I don't want to be critical or seem ungrateful, but it's pretty unappetizing. What's your advice for how to communicate about this without hurting her feelings? And it's signed, A Hairy Predicament. And Eric replies, Dear Harry, I'm curious if you find a hair in the dinners she makes as well, or just the lunches. I suppose it's moot, but you might employ a different strategy if this was related more broadly to kitchen hygiene practices. But let's assume it's just about lunch. I honestly think that the easiest course of action would be to pick out the hair and move on. However, I am empathetic to the fact that we can't always control what makes us lose our appetites, nor whether that appetite comes back. If your wife's kind gesture isn't having the desired impact, it's fine to pivot. You can do this indirectly by telling her you appreciate how much help she's providing with grocery shopping and cooking, and you have appreciated the lunches, but you'd like to pack them yourself again. You can assure her that this isn't about the quality of the lunches, outside of the hair. It seems that they were pretty wonderful. Or you can do this directly by expressing the same level of gratitude, but also mentioning that you've noticed hairs on occasion. You might ask if she's noticed it too. If she hasn't, a solution might be as simple as asking her to keep an eye out for that stray hair. Next letter. Dear Eric, my husband and I are in our 70s. He is kind and generous to me and has no problem with buying me expensive gifts. We don't go out very often, but when we do, he will often blow his top when he sees what food or tickets are for an event cost, even when I offer to pay my share. He then makes a public scene. I worry that someone will call security. He doesn't yell at the employees, but he turns his ire on me. When I try to reason with him, he says he's going to just leave me wherever we are, but he never has. And I've learned not to engage with him when he gets to this point. And I'll calmly tell him I'll just take the bus home and pull out my phone and start scrolling. He calms down fairly quickly and always apologizes. But I'm left shaking, as well as angry and disappointed, because he has spoiled what I thought might be a good time. I then resolve to only come back to the offending establishment with my friends and leave him at home. Sometimes I try to talk to him beforehand and remind him that the prices will be high, and I walk him through what might be a better reaction, and I ask him to make suggestions about what would make him more comfortable. It's exhausting for me, but it works once in a while. Is there anything else I can do? Like learn to let this roll off my back? And it's signed, Married to a Cranky Old Coot. And Eric replies, Dear Married, good for you on trying to have a reasonable conversation with him. His inability or unwillingness to amend his behavior is a major concern for concern, however. Blowing up at you and making threats about leaving you is emotionally abusive behavior. Consider talking to a friend or a therapist about other aspects of his behavior to see if there are other places where you're having to deal with outbursts or manipulative actions. Right now, he isn't deserving of the privilege of going out with you. Explain to him that these outbursts aren't just embarrassing, but they're emotionally abusive and make you feel unsafe. Tell him that you won't be going out with him at all until he talks to a counselor and comes up with a plan to control his emotions. He then needs to demonstrate that the plan is working and that you're safe before you can go out again. Wow.
Our Buffalo Next article on tourism. Buffalo to welcome first cruise ship in decades. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
This is written by Samantha Christman, who's a news staff reporter. Buffalo's first cruise passengers in decades will glide into town next week, ushering in a new era of Great Lakes cruise tourism for the Queen City. State officials are capitalizing on the growing interest in sailing the Great Lakes and have engaged with at least 2 cruise lines that have added Buffalo to their itineraries. The goal is to bolster tourism, draw more interest in Western New York, and increase visitor spending locally. Buffalo's waterfront is no longer a relic of our industrial past, but a premier gateway to the Great Lakes and a powerhouse for Western New York's tourism economy, Governor Kathy Hochul said in a statement. Connecticut-based American Cruise Lines will be the first cruise line to visit Buffalo, while Indiana-based Victory Cruise Lines has Buffalo on its 2027 itinerary. American Cruise Lines is making its debut voyage to Buffalo with a new 130-passenger boat. Christened the American Patriot, it will tie up around 8 p.m. May 28th. The following morning, passengers will fan out into Buffalo, taking excursions to such places as the Buffalo AKG Art Museum, the Buffalo and Erie County Naval and Military Park, and the Darwin Martin House. The excursions are planned through the cruise line, giving a welcome boost to the region's cultural centers. There are many great places for our cruise guests to explore and to enjoy culturally focused shore excursions, said Alexa Palolella, a spokesperson for the American Cruise Lines. Some cruises will use Buffalo as a place to begin or end cruises, creating more opportunity for extended stays, hotel bookings, and local visitor spending. Because American and Victory Cruise Lines originate in the United States, their stops in Buffalo don't require a presence from U.S. Customs. American is offering 3 of the first and only all-domestic cruises on the Great Lakes, something many of our guests, all fans of U.S. river and small ship cruising, have been asking for some time, she said. A permanent docking terminal and U.S. Customs facility are planned for Buffalo's outer harbor along the south berth of Slip 2 on Furman Boulevard, on the site where the former Pier restaurant was demolished in 2007. Construction has not begun on that site, but is expected to be completed by summer 2028. By transforming this long vacant Slip 2 site into a cruise line terminal, we are ensuring that Buffalo is no longer a city that cruise ships bypass, but a destination where they can begin and end their journeys, Hochul said. With this investment, we will welcome the world and provide visitors with new ways to experience the Queen City of the Lakes. In the meantime, boats will dock at the Erie Basin Marina alongside the Miss Buffalo, which has room for 1 cruise ship at a time. Because of the lack of a customs facility at the temporary dock, only cruise ships originating in the United States will be able to visit until the permanent terminal is complete. Last year, the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation, the state agency overseeing Buffalo's waterfront development, approved the selection of a design team which has been working on site analysis and starting the programming and setting implements of the site. The state will convert the former site of the Pier restaurant into a home port and stop for Great Lakes cruise ships, bringing a new form of tourism to Buffalo with a new set of international visitors, while also filling in a large gap on the Lake Erie waterfront. Plans call for the design of 1 or 2 small single-story buildings for customs processing and restrooms. Site improvements will include upgrades to seawalls, site remediation, improved public access, landscaping, drainage, lighting, and a small parking lot. This terminal is designed to blend seamlessly with the natural beauty and the aesthetic we've established at Wilkinson Point and the Bell Slip, creating a continuous experience along the outer harbor, said Joan Kesner, chair of ECHDC. American Cruise Line's high-end journey through the Great Lakes, which starts at about $8,000, lasts 9 days. Future ACL cruises in May will travel one way from Syracuse, travel down the St. Lawrence Seaway, and end in Buffalo. On board, the ship has a dining room, a top deck for observation and socializing called the Sky Lounge, a sun deck with a sky walk, and outdoor cafe dining options. All staterooms have private balconies. Visit Buffalo has said the region benefits from the influx of tourist spending and visits to local cultural centers. It's also a great way to introduce the region to new tourists who are likely to return later. It is a pretty affluent traveler that takes the Great Lakes cruises, said Patrick Collar, president and CEO of Visit Buffalo. The great thing is they get a taste of the destination, and their propensity to make return visits is very high. Ooh, that's exciting.
It is.
I like that.
We don't have to take an airplane to get there.
No, that's right.
Our next article is about golf, but it's really a human interest story about Brooks Koepka, who says he's in a better place after a year of tragedy, and it's entitled Family First. As Rory McIlroy and Brooks Koepka finished their 3rd round Saturday at the 2026 PGA Championship, it was McIlroy who spotted Cruz Koepka first. He pointed out the 2-year-old in the crowd to Koepka, who stopped and made a beeline to grab his son for the walk to the scoring tent. Though Koepka's hard luck at the recent majors continued at the golf club with a 74 on Sunday, when his putting and iron play kept him out of contention, the 35-year-old reiterated ahead of the tournament that his perspective has changed due to what his family went through of late. He's having more fun, and the difference goes beyond his switch back to the PGA Tour from the LIV golf tournament. Koepka and his wife, Jenna Sims, went through a miscarriage last year. Koepka noted that he returned to the PGA Tour, that the decision was him in part to be closer to his family more often. Sims wrote on social media in October of 25 the couple was devastated. Koepka went into more detail with reporters. We have a lot of family issues go on last year, Koepka told reporters at the PGA Championship. It was noted that it took a toll on me. It definitely took a toll on Jenna. That was kind of a tough thing to deal with. Yeah, I mean, at home, it's in a much better place. It's easier to come out to work when everything at home lines up. Everything's a lot better now. Last year was just difficult personally with what was going on off the golf course, nothing to do on it. It was just off. Koepka couldn't build on a momentum he had after carding a 64 during the Myrtle Beach Classic leading to the PGA Championship. The five-time major winner has not found the groove in 2026 with just one top 10 finish in his 10 PGA Tour starts thus far this season. He has notably served as an alternate in the fields of the PGA Tour signature events after not earning an invitation through his play. Koepka is not eligible to receive sponsors' exemptions to signature events under the conditions set by the PGA Tour upon his return this season. Koepka, who is 35 years old, rejoined the PGA Tour at the start of the 2026 season through its temporary returning member program for golfers who have been away from the PGA Tour for at least 2 years and have won the Players Championship, Masters Tournament, PGA Championship, US Open, or the Open Championship during the span from 2022 to the 2025 seasons. Despite the lack of success since coming back, especially with his putting, Koepka said he feels more at ease on the course now that the trauma of a year ago is further in the past. Just being in a better place, it's exciting, Koepka said. It's a little bit of a fresh start as well. I think that's a big piece of it. Yeah, when it all kind of lines up, it makes it just enjoyable to be out there.
And to our Alan Pergament TV column, Byron's lips sealed on tonight's finale of Next Level Chef. It is essentially Game 7 for Darian Bryan. The Buffalo Chef is one of the 3 finalists competing at 8 p.m. Thursday, WUTV, in the season finale of the Fox cooking show Next Level Chef. The winner gets $250,000 and a year-long mentorship from the 3 judges, Gordon Ramsay, Richard Blais, and Nashia Arrington. Bryan has been the overwhelming favorite of prediction markets, getting percentages in the 90s recently from the prediction market Kalshi. Since the series ended filming in late December in Ireland, you wonder if prediction markets know something or if they are going to be embarrassed. One thing is certain, the Jamaican-born Byron can keep a secret. He's known the result for months. I can keep a secret too. Fox sent the finale episode featuring Bryan and the remaining 2 competitors, Cole Lawson and Connor Kane, to critics to preview. I've seen it. I'm not going to spoil anything for fans by revealing the winner, but I can say family members and friends of the competitors are brought to the finale. Bryan's wife Jessica and mother Aletha, who Bryan calls the two most important people in his life, attend. As Buffalo food critic and reporter Jessica Bond wrote a few weeks ago, regardless of whether he wins on television, Bryan keeps investing in Buffalo. Bryan and his wife and business partner Jessica plan to expand their Larkinville restaurant footprint beyond the upscale Jamaican lunch and dinner restaurant Bratz Hill and private dining venue, the Plating Society. They will open a new restaurant, Reserve Steakhouse, in June. It will be at 703 Seneca Street, where Eccles operated until closing at the end of April. In the hour-long Next Level Chef finale, the chefs are given 90 minutes to cook an appetizer, a meat dish, and a fish dish for the judges and mentors. Just like Game 7 of the Buffalo Sabres playoff series with the Montreal Canadiens, it goes down to the wire and the final dish. I can report that the finale ends in tears. I just can't say whether they're the same kind of tears that Sabres fans experienced Monday night or tears of joy for Brian, his wife, and mother. Ooh, we'll have to watch that.
There's gambling on that, I think. Who's going to win? Anyway, we're going to end today with an article from My View, and this was written by Carlo Felice, who's a philosophy professor at SUNY Geneseo, and he writes on how the war machine protects itself. War is almost always evil. Even in the best circumstances, it means the slaughter of humans. Yet, here we are again, engaged in a very expensive war of choice. This year, $1 trillion will be spent by the War Department. A record $1.5 trillion is being proposed by our current government for next year. This, while millions of working-class Americans are losing health insurance coverage. This, while prices of coffee, peanut butter, gasoline, and other basics skyrocket, partly because of this war choice. One way that war is sold to us, insofar as it is not imposed, is through the soft censoring of pacifist voices. Here are two examples of such voices, among many. Jesus of Nazareth and Major General Smedley Butler. One comes from the world of spirituality, and one from the world of war making. What they share are ideas that threaten the economic and political machinery of war. Unlike hard censorship, which bans text outright, soft censorship marginalizes dissent by reframing it as idealistic, unpatriotic, or obsolete. The pacifism of Jesus is the most sanitized example of soft censorship in Western history. While Jesus states that our truest moral test is not how we deal with our friends, but how we treat our enemies with love, most self-professed Christians advocate just wars or even eye-for-eye policies. We all know about love thy neighbor. What is mostly never mentioned is that Jesus also proclaims love thy enemy. He argues that anyone can be kind to the just, or those who are good to you, your family, and your people. Even traitors can love their families. So there is little credit in this easy kindness. The real moral test is our treatment of persecutors and enemies. He insists on some level of love. He does not qualify this love of enemies as pertaining only to saints. Centuries of state-aligned theology have diluted or dismissed Jesus' radical pacifism as perfectionist and unsuitable for the real world of statecraft. He called his dismantle of the sword and turned the other cheek, and it's replaced by a Christianity that coexists with swords and bombs. Where Jesus offered a spiritual challenge, Major General Smedley Butler offered a structural one. In his 1935 book, War is a Racket, Butler, a highly decorated Marine, argued that behind the veneer of patriotism, war is mostly a profit-driven enterprise. He argued that the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. The soft censorship of Butler operates through historical omission. Despite his high rank and the explosive nature of his testimony for foiling the business plot, which was a coup attempt by rich U.S. bankers and industrialists against federal FDR, Butler is rarely a central figure in American history curricula. His critique is categorized as a relic of pre-World War II isolationism rather than a warning about the military-industrial complex. The common thread between these two examples is how the war machine protects itself. Soft censorship doesn't need to burn books. It simply needs to control the narrative. This is achieved through framing pacifism as noble but impractical. It is achieved through the patriotism trap, equating calls for a smaller military with a lack of courage or loyalty.
It's an excellent article.
Yeah.
Some of those My View pieces are terrific.
Makes you really think about it, right?
It does.
Well, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for May 21st. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m., and then we rebroadcast them at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. And your readers today have been
Ruth Nowotniak.
and Ted Pajacki. We thank you for listening and hope you have a good day.
Welcome summer with your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We're planning a summer bash bigger and better than ever before. It's Friday, June 26th at Creekside Banquet Facility in Grove, located at the corner of Union Road and William Street in Cheektowaga. You're invited to enjoy a buffet chicken and pasta dinner, your first drink on us, a basket raffle, and Buffalo Music Hall of Fame party band The Boys of Summer from 6 to 9 p.m. Tickets are $50 and support the 160 volunteers who read all the programming offered by Radio Reading. That's Friday, June 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Creekside Banquet Facility in Grove in Cheektowaga. Get your tickets now by calling 716-821-5555 extension 3 or online at nfradioreading.org. Thank you to New Era Cap Foundation, Tyverin Law, and Perry's Ice Cream for sponsoring this largest event of the year.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, the New York Times Business section. Following that at noon is the USA Today. Stay with us for these readings and more. have low vision, or have another print disability, would